You ever have those mornings where you walk into the shop, flip the lights on, and for a split second, you're convinced the tools moved while you were sleeping?
I think that's just the early onset of woodworker's brain, Tiger. Or maybe your jigs are finally trying to make a break for it.
It wouldn't surprise me, especially with the news coming out of the shipyards lately. I feel like if I turn my back on my table saw, it's going to sprout legs and start asking for a dental plan.
Oh, you're talking about the South Korean humanoid welders. I saw the footage. It's wild. They actually look like literal people standing there with torches. It's a bit uncanny valley, isn't it?
It's a lot uncanny. My first reaction was to clutch my favorite angle grinder and tell it everything was going to be okay. But honestly, as much as I like to grumble about the good old days, I've spent enough time folded into the bilge of a rusty boat or squeezed into a crawl space with a stick welder to know that some jobs are just plain miserable for a human spine.
Right. The article mentions they're focusing on ergonomic nightmares, which, if I remember your stories correctly, was about 90% of your early career.
At least. I once spent 6 hours welding a bracket inside a stainless steel vat that was so cramped I had to be pulled out by my ankles like a stubborn cork. My knees haven't forgiven me since 2004. So, if a robot wants to take over the becoming a human pretzel portion of the job, I say let them have at it. We keep the brains, they keep the backaches.
Speaking of specialized gear, what's the deal with this NK23 MySpot welder? The specs look like something out of a sci-fi flick.
It's a beast, Alex. It's a horizontal table-type spot welder. Most people think of spot welding as this clunky, handheld tong-looking thing that sparks and leaves a giant dent. But this MySpot system from Koyogiken, it's basically the Ferrari of joining sheet metal. It's fast, it's clean, and most importantly, it doesn't leave those nasty heat marks on the underside of the workpiece.
So less grinding later?
Exactly. And in my world, less grinding is the sweetest song you can sing. I've spent more of my life covered in grinding dust than I have in actual skin.
You also flagged some new tech for the machinists, the horn slot broaching system. It sounds like a medieval torture device, but I assume it's actually for making very small, very precise holes.
Close. It's for cutting internal grooves, particularly in tiny diameters. Usually, when you're working with solid carbide tools, you're limited by how deep you can go before the tool starts screaming at you, or just snaps like a dry twig. But Horn redesigned the shank on these so you can go deeper and longer without losing stability. It's the difference between trying to carve a pumpkin with a toothpick versus a surgical scalpel.
Okay, let's pivot. If someone's listening to this and they're thinking, great, the robots are coming and the tools are getting smarter, how do I not get left behind? What's the play?
You got to lean into the hybrid life. The American Welding Society is basically waving a giant flag at FabTech this year saying, the future is a guy in a hood who also knows how to code.
So the golden ticket isn't just knowing how to lay a perfect bead anymore?
Look, a beautiful hand-welded seam will always be a work of art. But the money, the buy a lake house money in 2026, that's in the 5-day intensive robotics certifications. You spend a week learning how to teach the robot how to weld. You're not the laborer, you're the conductor of the orchestra.
It's a lot to keep up with. Sometimes I just want to hit some wood with a hammer.
And that's why we have the Maker Mogul Corner, because you can't buy the high-tech toys if you isn't selling your work.
I noticed you shared a tip about authentic storytelling. Are we really telling people to post their failures? Because I've seen your scrap pile, Tiger. It's not exactly a vibe.
Hey, that scrap pile is a museum of what not to do. But seriously, if you only post the after photo, the perfect, glossy, finished humidor, people think it was easy. And if they think it's easy, they think it's cheap.
So the failure adds value?
It adds humanity. I remember working on a custom cherry table months ago. I was on the final coat of finish, literally the last 6 inches, and a spider decided that was the perfect moment to skydive into the middle of the wet poly.
No way.
Total disaster. I had to sand the whole top back down. I filmed the whole meltdown, me swearing at the spider, the sanding dust everywhere, the frustration. That video got 10 times the engagement of the finished table. People want to see the struggle. They want to know that the person they're buying from has a pulse and a temper.
It makes them feel like they're buying a story, not just a piece of furniture. It's that Russell Brunson funnel logic, right? Connect with the person first, sell the product second.
Precisely. If you're a maker in 2026 and you're acting like a faceless corporation, you're leaving money on the table. Be a person. Be a messy, mistake-making person who eventually finishes something beautiful.
Speaking of beautiful things, let's talk DIY. You mentioned Japanese-inspired upgrades. Does this mean I have to learn how to sit on the floor while I work? Because my back is with the robots on that one.
No floor sitting required. It's more about the philosophy of intentionality. I spent years working in what I called organized chaos, which is just a fancy way of saying I spent 20 minutes looking for my tape measure every time I needed to mark a board.
I've seen you do it. You had it in your hand, then you set it down to itch your nose, and it vanished into another dimension.
It's a talent. But the Japanese-inspired shop focus is all about everything having a home that makes sense for the flow of work. It's about clean lines and removing the friction of making.
Like that magnetic walnut tool holder you mentioned?
Exactly, that's a perfect gateway project. You take a beautiful scrap of walnut, something too good to throw away but too small for a table leg, embed some rare earth magnets in the back, and boom, your chisels are right there, no digging through a drawer. It's functional art.
And then there's the boss level project, the custom cabinet humidor. That sounds daunting. Cedar linings, humidity seals? That's not exactly a weekend and a six-pack kind of project.
No, that's a clear your calendar and buy a fresh bottle of wood glue project. Building a humidor is actually less about woodworking and more about creating a pressurized environment. Spanish cedar is finicky. It moves whenever the wind blows. Getting those seals tight enough to hold 70% humidity, but loose enough that the drawers don't stick, that's where you separate the hobbyist from the craftsman.
It sounds like it's all about the details, which seems to be the theme of today. Whether it's a robotic arm on a ship or a magnetic strip in a garage, it's about the precision, isn't it?
It really is. We're in this weird, wonderful transition. We've got robots doing the heavy lifting, but the heart of it, the why we build things, is still just a person standing at a bench trying to make something better than it was yesterday.
So, what's the big takeaway for the TigerDen fam today, if they only remember one thing while they're out there in the heat?
I'd say, don't fear the new, but don't lose the old. Learn how the robot works, but don't forget how the metal feels under a hammer. And for heaven's sake, if a spider falls in your finish, don't just cry about it. Film it.
Spoken like a true maker mogul.
Seriously though, the tools are changing faster than we are. But a sharp blade and a good story, those never go out of style. Whether you're a pro in the trades or just trying to get your garage organized so you can finally park the car in there, stay hungry for the knowledge.
And maybe keep a lid on your finish cans.
Yeah, that too.
See you tomorrow, Tiger.
Stay sharp, Alex. Keep building.